Well, hello everybody. Today I have a special guest, a very close and dear friend of mine, and I wanted to make this live post with my dear friend, Dr. Michael Lebowitz. And I hold him dear as one of my main mentors. He has just a whole amount of knowledge that I wish I could gain in my lifetime. And I know that many people out there that when they saw the post I've had with Dr. Lebowitz, we went out to Japan at one point, and many of you wrote back how much you loved this guy because of his openness about things. We want to talk about in this conversation, and there can lead it to many other things. But the things that I've seen that Dr. Lebowitz helps so many people out is mainly like we love that he can help with chronic infections, chronic food states where people are eating the wrong foods, and we want his take and his thoughts on that. And also about like supplements, about the choices we have in the US and maybe where the industry is going. So Doc, thanks so much for joining me today on this post.
My pleasure. Always great to see you.
Oh, you too. You too. I remember like I was first time I met you, and people like to hear stories, I guess, to start off. But first time I met you, I was in Dallas, and I knew you probably don't remember it. But the first time I saw you, we had a whole room of doctors in Dallas, and I'd heard so many things about you. My friend Jeff is out in Grand Junction with Alex Gilmore, and they knew you real well, and they were like, "You got to follow Dr. Lebowitz protocols." And I remember honestly, guys, everybody out there, I was like really nervous when I met him, even though he was just monitoring everybody, and I was like, I don't know if I should say hi or if I should say anything. And your son was up there, and he was just a master of muscle testing. And I'm so thankful because I love Noah. He's a great guy. But I know that we like to dig right in because that's how Doc is. He likes to just jump right in. But Doc, okay, many people out there have many health conditions, and I follow your protocols to know that many of the major symptoms are coming from chronic infections. This is a very general question, very broad, but I'm saying, why is it that with your testing that you found that the infections could be a cause of many of the issues for people when they don't even know what's going on? But why do you search for infections? Because I know you have your own personal story, but I want to get your take on that.
Actually, let me go into a little story first, since you brought up Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
So in that Dallas seminar, I went down there, and my leg below my knee was really swollen, probably 3 times the size of the other leg, my left leg. And we were living in Arizona, and I thought perhaps I had been bitten by a scorpion or something like that. So I like to lay out in the sun there. And it turned out that I had a virus, and the virus caused me to coagulate and form blood clots.
Mm-hmm.
I had a really big blood clot in my leg that was probably about 12 inches long, and I didn't know it. And so I remember going up to one of the docs there, and he was like yanking on my leg and trying to adjust all the bones, which in retrospect could have killed me, because he could have, broke loose the blood clot, which I've had 2 other blood clots from infections that traveled to my lungs. So I remember that seminar just because of the blood clot story. I teach a Bible class, and we actually divide the first 5 books of the Bible into 54 portions. And the portion we taught last week was in the book of Leviticus, and it's about fungal infections on the skin and on clothing.
Oh, wow.
And the next week is fungal infections in houses. And so this goes back like thousands of years. And, my interest started back when we lived in West Virginia, and we were living in a moldy house, and I used to collect antiquarian health books. So I had all these books by people like Sylvester Graham and John Harvey Kellogg, and all of the natural remedies they used to do back then. I didn't realize that having a treatment room with 1,150-year-old books could be problematic. And I was breathing in mold all day, and as a result, I developed chronic fatigue. And over the years, we've developed different protocols to tell, do people have an issue with funguses, bacteria, parasites, viruses? we also found that a lot of things were secondary to them. Like, for instance, if you have what's called dysbiosis, so the wrong microbes living in your gut, it's going to cause leaky gut. And you can have leaky gut forever, but if you don't get to the underlying infection, it just keeps recurring or it never resolves. Fungal infections can cause chemical sensitivities, because having a fungus grow in your gut is like having Monsanto grow in your gut. It produces aldehydes, it produces benzene. Your body's detox system is so tied up with dealing with chemicals that are being produced inside your body that if it's exposed to anything on the outside, some perfume or a little bit of air pollution, it just falls apart. It's just an overload. These microbes will grow quicker in exposure to electromagnetic fields. So if you're working under fluorescence or on top of fluorescence all day long, or you're using your cell phone up against your head or something, the infections are going to grow quicker. If you're eating a lot of sugar, your immune system's not going to be able to engulf any of those microbes, and the infection's going to go quicker. And also stress shrinks your thymus gland. That was proven when Hans Selye won the Nobel Prize many years ago. And so, if you're under stress, and stress could be relational stress, it could be spiritual stress, it could be physical stress, like you're doing even a cold plunge or something we look at as being healthy. Dietary stress from what you're eating, your thymus gland will shrink from those type of stresses, so it won't be able to optimally fight any infections you're around. We live in tighter houses, so infections that used to be rarer are much more common these days. And then again, they spread to other things. Probably the most common symptoms are brain fog and fatigue, mood swings, but they could be about anything. We've had people who their only symptom was they couldn't grow a beard. Got rid of the infection, suddenly they grew a full beard. I wasn't expecting that, but we saw stuff like that. So it creates nutritional deficiencies. You have fungus that's going to eat up your B vitamins. You have parasites that can eat just about any nutrient. So, this one little thing can spread and affect any part of the body, any mood you have, just all your cognitive ability, all kinds of things.
Oh, and Doc, this is it's profound, because many people are going to listen to this when you're talking about like all the avenues that an infection can grow and how they can be profound and proliferate. I want to go back to like when you're talking about in the Bible, how it talks about if there was fungal in the clothes or in the house. And I like to address a couple of these comments. What, like in the Bible, what would they do? Like I know what we would do. We'd try to clean those out. What would they do in the Levitical times if they found it in the house? Like what was like one of the pathways that you teach, they taught in the Bible?
Let's talk about if they find it on someone first, because I think that's really fascinating.
Right. Yeah.
Is what they would do, they would isolate the person. So they'd be taken outside of the camp, put in a different structure. So in case it was in their house, they wouldn't be, exposed to it that week. They'd also be away from, their spouse. So if they were passing it back and forth with their spouse, that wouldn't happen. So they're away from everything. And imagine if you were by yourself for a week back then. You didn't have cell phones, you didn't have TV. So first you're probably going through some type of anger type of thing, or a denial or something, and you're stressed out, but eventually, ideally, you would just kind of lay back and chill out and introspect. And you just think about life and priorities and all these different things. Your parasympathetic nervous system would kick in because you're just kind of meditating and so forth. And you'll start like a whole, plus you're not exposed. And you're eating the perfect food, which was manna. God didn't make, manna to be like Hostess Twinkies or anything. It was like the perfect food. So they're eating the perfect food. And then, they, on reintroducing them to the community, if things look better, they did a ceremony where they applied essential oils, that had antimicrobial properties to them. If it was on the clothes, you would isolate the clothes, and if it didn't go away, they burn the clothes. With a house, they would take everything out of the house, and if the house didn't, and you're in the hot desert, so it has a chance to kind of remediate itself, but if it didn't, they would dismantle the house and take all the different bricks or whatever and basically take it out of the camp.
Oh, wow.
It'd be great if the insurance companies would do that today with moldy houses, sick people.
That's like, so it's like a matter of isolation, because I know, those patients that have literally had to like get rid of like the mold because of the way they stick on clothes, they stick on fabrics, and they've had to like literally get rid of mattresses or get rid of their clothing. And I feel for the individuals that have that. Now, when they found that, you're talking about that point about when your mate has that, like when somebody comes into contact. So one of the questions I get is, Doc, can your spouse, or can your partner, can they pass things to you? Is that a possibility?
Any exchange of body fluid can pass anything one person has to the next.
Okay.
And it's not only, it could be a sexual partner, it could be your cat, your dog likes to lick your face.
Yep. That's like, I got in trouble. Like, I'll tell you, Doc, I say got in trouble. I did a podcast at one time with a gentleman out in Las Vegas, and they were talking about parasites. And I talked about like where I had patients where there are two young boys, and they both, like, from just kinesiology, muscle testing. So I'm just saying, like, we were just doing some muscle testing. I found a certain strand of parasite that I suspected could be causing some of the conditions for these patients. And they both had, and the both of them showed it. And I kept finding like sensitivities around their mouth. They said they hurt here. And I was like, well, the parasite that showed was like canine born. And I was like, well, do you guys have a dog? And they're like, and she goes, yes, the dog licks them all in the face. They let it lick right here and stuff like that. And I would tell you, I wasn't trying to be anti-dog, but I had quite a bit of people saying, well, I let my dog kiss me in the face and stuff like that. So that's a possibility, right, Doc? I mean, that's a real possibility.
And dogs, will respond well to herbs. You can kill the stuff in the dog just as well as you can, kill it in the person. One thing that I think is really important is, functional medicine's really into presence. And they do all these different lab tests for, what's growing in your gut. And what's interesting is a lot of times they're not that good. I mean, I've sent this sample from the same stool to a very reputable company, 2 samples under 2 different names from the same bowel movement, and I get 2 totally different groups of readings.
What?
In fact, one guy who was a SIBO expert, this was a few years back, he said when he sends him out, his medical doctor, he said that he has an 11% agreement between companies on what microbes are there.
No.
Maybe it's gotten better since then, but he was considered the top in his field like 5 or 6 years ago when we did this. The other thing that's important is there could be 2 people, you could go into a moldy environment and someone else could, the other person's going to be fine. You might fall apart. Mm-hmm. That could be a number of things. That could be that you have a gene that makes it harder to detoxify mold. It could be you're low in certain nutrients. It could be your body is stuck in like sympathetic overload. And as soon as you have a little bit of an exposure, it plays this loop of fear. And so you start reacting. What's really interesting is that if you want to do something interesting, if you're a muscle tester, mm-hmm. ask the patient what they're sensitive to, like what they know they're sensitive to. So mm-hmm. if they ask you and you say, gee, I'm really sensitive to corn. I never eat corn. Mm-hmm. So what I'll do is I'll take a vial and I'll take an apple vial and I'll say, well, now I'm going to test you on corn. And you blow out on it because you think it's corn, even though it's apple. And then I could switch it around and say, hey, let's test the apple vial now, but I'm testing the corn and it won't show up.
Oh.
Because your mind, will play these different, scenarios and dramas based on past history and other things that unless you break that cycle, it's kind of like Skinnerian conditioning. If you have a rat and every time you give the rat a shock, you ring a bell. All you need to do is ring a bell and the rat freaks out. So all you need to do is think this place might be moldy or think that there's something wrong with this food. And there might very well be, and you might be reacting from that. Or again, your body might just go into the reaction for, neurological reasons.
Well, so when you're thinking about the neurological reasons and the traumatic, that would make me also suspect that maybe we can go down this route when you're saying like your belief and your neurological programs, that are set, like you have something that you like how you believe. Are there things that you see in your patients and your clients, like their belief systems make them sick? Is that too general of a question? But have you found that like that what they believe can make them feel bad?
What you believe is going to change, levels of hormones and different neurochemicals your body's making. It can deplete certain nutrients. It can definitely play a role, especially in your, if you have a chronic problem, that's never gone away under good treatment. There's probably many things involved at this point. There's probably sensitivity reactions. There's probably deficiencies. There's probably psychological. There might be spiritual. It's like everything kind of congregates. And there's a saying that I learned from Dr. Sherry Rogers. And she said, if someone nails 100 nails in your foot and you come along and take 50 out, would you feel better? Now, my wife would feel better if you took one of those 100 nails out. I would not feel any better till the 100th one came out.
That's true, I believe.
And that, that's probably a learned behavior, back from, when I was little that, that somehow, and I didn't want to get into this because this is future stuff, but somehow you need to reprogram yourself so your body doesn't automatically go into that direction on exposures.
Gotcha. And we can talk about that in a future time. I know we can talk more into that. Like when we're seeing that there is this much sickness created by, I guess, emotional and psychological programming. And I wanted to jump also into what we're seeing now in the world. So yes, we can have the influence from people around us, like our emotions, but now we're starting to see a lot of more influence, like you said, about EMF fields. And I think that that's one big arena too that you've taught me a lot about. But I don't think people out there may know the depth of EMF growth or causing growth of the microbes in the gut. Can you go a little bit more in depth in that?
I mean, we had a patient a long time ago who was he was a doctor. He was disabled from depression, and he had a fungal infection, and he had a lot of food sensitivities, and he got better after treating, and he was able to go back to practice. And we decided to do an experiment. His practice was on the second floor, and on the floor right below him was basically a bank of fluorescent lights. So all day long, he was standing, however many feet thick the wall is, on a bank of fluorescent lights. And he would keep getting these fungal infections back, and we couldn't get rid of them for very long. And then we decided to do something. We basically grew some fungus in Petri dishes. And we put one up on his desk, and we put one on the floor where he stands. And the one on the floor where he stands, which had a much higher EMF reading, grew like crazy compared to the other one.
Wow. And so it showed to him like the things are growing because they say it stimulates that fungal growth and then the toxicities follow. How is there a way, like if somebody's out there and they are in that kind of situation, they're like, I know I'm sick and stuff. I know you want to get rid of the EMF. There's maybe two parts of this. Do you think that, of course, you want to take antifungals, and we can talk about that, but do EMF protectors work? Do you find that those, the ones that you see out there in, our health culture?
If you've ever watched my son, he's very blunt about these. I haven't found one I like. I mean, we do have something like this on our phone, like a Defender Shield, I think it's called, or Face.
Yeah.
And if you measure, with an EMF meter, those do accomplish something. They definitely decrease the numbers. The other day, Noah had gotten something, I don't want to mention the company because he gets a lot of free things for us to evaluate. And it was something you're supposed to put on the bottom of your laptop, and it blocks EMFs. So we had our EMF meter, we measured, we put the thing on, we measured, same. And it's the same with most of the things. They claim that they make the EMF or the electromagnetic field safer.
Mm-hmm.
There's no real way to prove that or not. Even though they come up with all kinds of things, all I know is that there are very few that actually decrease the quantity of the field, and to me, that's most important. It lowers your pyridoxal 5-phosphate level. It basically ruins your pineal gland, which is basically, in control of your hypothalamus and your pituitary and your adrenals and thyroid, etc.
Mm.
I mean, there are some herbs, like we like an herb. The product's called Bodyguard Supreme, but it's Philanthus neruri. And when we were studying EMFs, what we did was we had about 100 different herbs, and we exposed people to EMFs. And if they showed a muscle test response, we basically blind tested all these different herbs, and we found that one seemed to allow people to tolerate the field better.
Mm.
Don't exactly know how, but we did give it to some very EMF sensitive people. And the feedback we got was, yes, it does seem to help us quite a bit. So whether it strengthens the pineal, I'm not sure, but just from a clinical response, it seemed to show some effect. Ideally, you want to avoid it, but if you live in a condo, you live in an apartment, it's pretty much impossible. I mean, you could theoretically put down, lead lining or make a Faraday cage and so forth, but you want to be healthy enough that you can have a acceptable exposure, if there is such a thing, and not develop symptoms as a result. But part of that is the more metals, metals a lot of act as conductors.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a lot of metals in your body's going to be much more reactive to electromagnetic fields than if you don't.
Yes, that's great.
Together.
Do you like with the using the Bodyguard, the Philanthus herb to help clean it out? You find that helps, and you're talking about toxic metals. That's a really good point, Doc. I mean, I know that it's starting to show that metals, like, they're actually really showing up on labs when people finally do some labs finding this problem. Where are some of these main sources of metals? Because you got the EMF, stimulating these metals. Where are they found?
Well, let me change the subject a little bit.
Yep.
Well, one thing we always teach is, if people ask me, what's the best way to tell how much metal is in your body?
Mm-hmm.
I just have one answer. And my one answer is cremation.
Okay.
Hair tests to me are not that good. If something is high in the hair, it could mean that it's high in the body. It could mean your body's great at getting rid of it, and it shoves it out in the hair, and it's not really a problem in you. You don't know which it is. Okay. If something's high in the urine, it's the same thing. Your body could be great at getting rid of it. And then there are some things, like when my mercury was through the roof, it was stored so tightly that it didn't show on provocative urine tests. And again, some of it depends on sensitivity. I have some people, you can bring a vial of mercury into the room and they go berserk, not even knowing you have it on you. And other people could drink a whole cup of it and not notice anything. So again, sensitivity is more important in my mind than quantity. And that's why something like muscle testing is so valuable, because it's picking up personalized sensitivities, which to me trumps quantity. Just because something's in there doesn't necessarily mean you should go after it.
That's a great point, because it's like at times when there are patients that I've seen that, through muscle testing, that even on their reports, they'll have, like you say, a higher amount of aluminum or something. And, if I'm doing some muscle testing, I find that aluminum doesn't necessarily weaken them, even though I'm doing everything I can to have provocative testing. So with that though, I mean, now we're having like the perfect storm, doc. We got like, there could be some metals that person or some people can be very sensitive to, causing by EMF, and you got like these different infections. I wanted to ask too, when you have all of these coming together, how important, I hope I can go through, is like when you're young, when you have a patient that tells you, like, I had like strep when I was young, and I hope I don't butcher this question, but do you find that when patients are like young and they had like a chronic condition, you have the buildup of metals from their food, or they have buildup of different type of external stresses, do those infections stay around for a long time and keep people chronically sick, or do the infections have the ability to stick around, especially when when a person's eating foods with preservatives or trans fats and things throughout their young life? Can it stick around to when they're older, and that's why they get totally sick?
I mean, a lot of them are dormant until you have the right stressor. I mean, look at shingles. I mean, the medical doctors, shingles, chicken pox. I mean, how long does it stay dormant in the body between the time of chicken pox and by the time the person gets shingles? I mean, it could be 50 years.
Yeah.
And that's true of so many things. If you're doing everything right, you don't have nutrient deficiencies, you don't have major dysbiosis, you're not eating things you're sensitive to, you have a relatively clean environment, your body can hold things in check. I mean, they find Lyme disease in mummies.
Wow.
But I'm sure that these mummies didn't go around with all the symptoms that people who have Lyme disease now do, because the body kept it in check. Two people get bit by a tick that has Lyme, one person gets really sick, one person doesn't. The body, it's still in there, but the body's able to keep it in check. But if that person suddenly goes through a divorce, gets into a car accident, someone dies and they're really close to, suddenly that could be enough to tip the scale, and suddenly it erupts and they have some autoimmune disease as a result, or some other, a more acute infection or something like that.
So when they're dormant, that's why I think that that when people, I think that's the beauty of the adaptability of the body. Like, some people don't realize, like you said, the mummy's holding in those infections. Like, sometimes patients will come in and like you say, shingles, or I have patients that have strep all of a sudden, and then they're like, why did this happen now? And same, I can't answer that. I don't have I'm like, it could have been in there for a long time and something brought it out. Come to the surface.
A little story, which I know you've heard before, but after my first bout of blood clots in my lungs, they did genetic testing, they did everything else. They said, it was a fluke, you'll never have it again. And I said, well, could it have been from that 105-degree fever and infection I had? And they go, no. And I handed them a stack like this high of research papers that show infection can cause blood clots to a hematologist. They said, oh, we don't need to read that. So I just thought, okay, I'm good. Not going to have it again. So a couple of years later, I'm going on some strong enzymes. I go on serapeptase or something. Reading about it on the internet, it sounded really good. And what I didn't realize, people didn't know much about biofilms back then. So even though I got over those blood clots, my body walled off some of that infection. So there was still some residual infection dormant, held in these biofilms. And when I took the serapeptase, one of the things it does is break down biofilms. So suddenly I relapsed into this infection that I thought I'd never have again, because I broke through the dormancy in a sense, and then that ended up with more blood clots in my lungs.
I mean, I will say this, Doc. I think that biofilms, when they stay dormant, that's one of the banes of my practice, is because you'll have patients with Lyme disease or parasites, and they do pretty good for a few months, and all of a sudden, you keep working away at it, and something from muscle testing and such, you'll see that biofilms show up, and I think it's a very important point, because I think that's one of the biggest things that we often miss. Like even with the way that you've showed through your technique about eating biofilms around the teeth. So the body's so good at it, and then you have to exude it out of the system. And I found that when we talk about biofilms, I had quick story, like you said, I had a patient that he had malaria really bad, and he had been in Africa, and he went and he was in the diamond trade business, and he went up into Paris after he got done, doc, and he almost died. Okay, but this is sort of after the fact that when I started treating him, he had such bad heart issues. His shunts, like in his heart, the stents, I'm sorry, would scar over, and they would get blocked every time they did up into the artery. And so when we were doing muscle testing, I found Plasmodium, which was malaria. And I couldn't say he has malaria. I said, "Did you ever have a case?" He goes, "Yeah, I almost died." He goes, "I was 2 weeks up in Paris," and he goes, "I was so sick." But he was doing pretty good. Like you said, throughout the time he thought he got better. But when he started taking stuff, like you said, enzymes and stuff, things started to come back up out of the surface. And I was like, what is a biofilm though? I mean, like what people are saying, like, what does this mean? Like when you have a biofilm?
I mean, biofilms, basically just a protective coating in a sense that the organism will make to protect itself from being destroyed by your body.
Mm.
Yeah, so take dental plaque.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a biofilm. Arterial plaque, they feel is a biofilm. So it's interesting. Sometimes people will go to the dentist and they'll get what at least used to be known as a deep cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
When they go in there and they basically disrupt all these biofilms with their machinery, and then maybe a month later, a person ends up with a kidney infection. But they never think back and think, well, the kidney infection must be because I went to the dentist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But or it's just like when people have their amalgams out and suddenly 6 months later they have some neurologic disease from the exposure. You never connect the things. I mean, it's rare, and even if you do and you go back and tell the doctor, a good doctor will take it seriously and really think about it, but most people will just be in denial, because you don't want to admit even to yourself that maybe you hurt someone inadvertently. But so biofilms, there are biofilms for every kind of organism. I mean, Lyme, Candida, all of them can potentially, and that's why some things like, for instance, take Listerine. Listerine's been around forever. The essential oil in Listerine breaks down biofilms. And that's why it worked. I mean, it has a lot of not so good ingredients in it, and there are better ways to do it without Listerine itself. But again, it worked because it broke down biofilms. Essential oils are especially good because not only do they break down biofilms, but they also kill the organisms within the biofilm, as opposed to the enzyme, which typically will break down the biofilm and let loose the organisms to wreak havoc if you're not careful.
Oh, yes. That makes, because like I love your products of the BFB1, the Biofilm Buster 1 and 2. And for everybody listening, like I know that we, get trained to put it on the feet, but I honestly I have found such good results, doc, by putting it on the area where I find like I muscle test and it's like it should be on the back of the shoulders or something like that. And it's killing off such good stuff. And when we're talking about how it lets loose and opens up different types of infections, does this go into play? Like, and I want you to make sure I don't want to lead our conversation in the way I want you to make sure you go into the direction you want, but also I want to talk about how not only biofilms, like we're finding that these can knock loose, can the food sources. You're very big adamant, and so is Noah, which I love about certain even foods or even food additives. And I love that you talk about salicylates, you talk about different types of food, proteins. Why is it, or how, like some of the major foods we eat now can open up these infections? Like, do they, this is the question, do they feed the infection or do they just weaken the body so the infections come out? Or both?
They definitely weaken the body. If you're eating something that you don't tolerate, your body's going to use, like epinephrine.
Hmm.
So, and that's going to deplete your adrenal glands. It's just like, if you have a bee sting, you go and you get an epinephrine shot.
Hmm.
If you eat something on a lower level, if you're sensitive to, your body's going to up its epinephrine. You'll end up depleting it. And one interesting thing, if you deplete epinephrine, you end up being depressed. And there's so many people who you foster that pathway of how the body makes epinephrine with either herbs like mucuna or amino acids like tyrosine, and suddenly their depression goes away. But it might have been just because they were eating. My first patient ever, when I was living in New Hampshire, came to me and he said, I have a great family, I have a great life, I love my job, but I want to kill myself.
Oh.
And, I'm fresh out of school, and it's like, what do I do? I mean, I don't know what to do. So, and he was very strong spiritually too. So, it wasn't that. And I just decided I'd been fooling around with foods. So I decided I'm going to test him on foods and test him all and everything else. I didn't find any subluxations. Everything was good. He was allergic to tomatoes. So I said, this has nothing to do with your, depression or suicidal thoughts, but you're allergic to tomatoes. Why don't you stop them? As soon as he stopped eating tomatoes, he stopped becoming suicidal. And he could turn on the suicidal feelings by eating a tomato.
Wow.
And, whether that has to do with epinephrine, I don't know, or, some of the inflammatory byproducts that allergic reactions cause, like kinins and histamines and so forth. But it was just fascinating to me.
Oh, I think that when you talk about what food can create, when we're talking even about lectins, like Stephen Gundry is big about lectins, but like even one thing I was really impressed with the testing that you and Noah teach is not just say lectins, but like even the coating of certain foods, like even the coatings of legumes or chickpeas or lentils. I'm not putting down those foods. Many people eat them, but I've noticed that some individuals, like you say, would have literally depression, like they would have certain forms of depression. And I can't say, yes, these are causing you depression, but I have found that too. Like sometimes if I find, and I go through all the list of foods, I have found, Doc, that just getting them off those foods, I can tell you that most every single patient I've done that strictly with, they've gotten 85, 90% better, literally just by stopping the food. But there's such a draw for them to want to go back. They always ask me, hey, Doc, when do you think I can go back on those foods? So I know it's a struggle for us. I mean, with the food industry now, like, I didn't want to interrupt you if you're going to say something, but I was like, with that though, like, can you heal the body by eliminating the foods? And like, let's say they had microbes. Can you clean up the microbes so they could eat more of the foods? Or is there just like they have to stay off forever?
Yeah, I wrote a paper back around 1990, published in a chiropractic journal. And we were doing, exposing people to foods they were sensitive to, tapping different acupuncture points, rubbing different reflexes, and then putting people back on the foods to see what percentage of the people were able to successfully reintroduce the food. So this was 1990. The success rate was about 91%. Success rate today would not be 91%. We didn't have all the EMFs, we didn't have all the GMOs, we didn't have a whole lot of stuff. But I'd say the success rate is at least 50%. And I think with some of the stuff we're doing now with the whole like neurologic loops that happen, the success rate should be higher than that. I mean, different, because over, like if you have I come from Russia. So say my family ate cabbage for, a couple of thousand years. Theoretically, I should be able to eat cabbage, but if I couldn't, you would think that there has to be some underlying cause that's allowing me to react to it, and again, figuring that out, whether it's microbes, emotions, organ dysfunction, leaky gut, whatever it happens to be, ideally those should heal and you should be able to reintroduce them. I mean, there are some that are passed down generationally. I've seen nightshades being passed down generationally. Dairy obviously could, but most of the things you should be able to get over.
Gotcha. I mean, that gives a lot of people comfort and hope, because I know you see it and I see it, that when you tell somebody that they have to stop eating nightshades, doc, they're like, you mean I have to stop eating potatoes? Like, and it's like their whole life. And you go, and then they feel better after it. And they're like, well, I mean, it's a chance I have to take. Like, I'll say this to everybody out there. Doc did some testing on me, and this is a testament about what he's talking about, that I had Lyme infection so badly, and I really feel like I cleared a lot of it out. Like, I don't have any like the symptoms, but I was feeling a little fatigued and tired. And me and Doc and I went to Japan, and Doc did some checking on me, and you found that I needed some Scutellaria, and you said I need some Scutellaria, and I said some olive leaf, and you upped my dosage, but you found fungal yeast. Well, the thing is, guys, when I had Lyme, Doc, I couldn't hardly eat beef. Like, it would just give me such bad indigestion all the time. Not even necessarily alpha-gal, like I was getting in a huge histamine response, but I missed beef because I just noticed I couldn't do it. I could hardly do eggs. But when you did that, I could tell I had a slight white coating on the tongue. But after I started doing that, I felt like somebody was squeezing my insides, Doc, like at night, like somebody was literally like a sponge. And I remember I was like, okay, so I did it for 2 weeks, and I tested some things. I tried to do some self-testing, Doc, and I was like, okay, I can cut it down to like 1 a day. And you know what? I started craving beef. And I started eating some beef, and I can start eating beef, and I can start eating eggs now. And I was like, and I've seen in my patients where I'm like, we cleaned up some parasitic stuff that I suspected, and it happened. So, you're right. With all the EMF fields, we have like a perfect storm going on, but there's still hope for people who want to eat some foods that they're always sensitive to. So that's good. I mean, like, I really wish like I had seen you like 5 years ago, or maybe I put a little more weight, a little more strength. but with that, dog. Okay, so I know that people out there, they know that they have food sensitivities, and they can clean this up. Now, when we talk about like Supreme Nutrition products, you developed that line. And like nowadays too, I know this is a big subject and it can be pretty broad, but I'm also like saying that like the supplements in our world, like everybody sees that you have this infection, you have this, and this, and they're like, we want to take this, and this. But the one thing I love about your line is that you teach us that you like single ingredient products, and you try not to overdo it. Like, you try to like find what's really specific for you. The quality of your products are very, very high. And I think you teach us a lot about the quality of supplements. What's the problem with our supplement world today? Like, why is it? Is there dirty supplements, or, is there quality product?
The best answer would be, on YouTube, we have a video that Noah and I did. I think it's called something like Vitamins or Supplements, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's on the Info Supreme Nutrition YouTube. There's the Supreme Nutrition YouTube and the Supreme Nutrition products. It's on the products one. The regular Supreme Nutrition is a different company. But, the goal of a company, any company on some level, is to make money.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if you add a lubricant, like you add magnesium stearate, or you add even one of the less detrimental lubricants like ascorbyl palmitate or leucine, it ends up cutting absorption down. It ends up speeding up the whole encapsulation process tenfold. So you can encapsulate way more in the same time period, so you make a lot more money. But it ends up basically decreasing absorption. People, you can look, every supplement has to be examined for microbes and metals and certain chemicals. So, every supplement basically passes those tests, or they can't legally be put out. But, certain things energetically, maybe they were harvested at the wrong time, or maybe they used a chemical that's not the couple that they checked for. Mm-hmm. So, we put ours through basically applied kinesiology testing before we come out with anything. There's a lot of things supplement companies don't tell you. That, almost all vitamins these days are manufactured in China, and they come from genetically modified bacteria and fungi.
Oh
And
man.
because you buy them from the company in China and it's in the US, you put them in the capsule, you can put made in USA. And you can
Oh.
even put non-GMO because they don't count GMO organisms as GMO in the supplement industry, it appears like. If an herb is a tincture and it's just in an alcohol tincture and it doesn't say organic alcohol, it's probably GMO corn alcohol because that's the cheapest. And corn is natural, so they can put all natural, whatever. There's different things. And sometimes the supplement company just is ignorant, because they farm it out to someone else to do it. They'll obviously take the bid that does it, the cheapest. And, they don't know any different. Because I've talked to a lot of supplement company owners, and a lot of them have, lack of awareness of these things. And I think supplements like vitamins and minerals, they have their place in time. We have to look at them more like pharmaceuticals in the way that they're manufactured, and look at them most of the time as not long-term solutions. Sometimes there might be some that have to be long-term, but usually if we get the environment under control, get their microbiome under control, get their diet under control, they don't have to take them long-term. So again, there's a lot of things in the supplement industry that if we all knew them, we'd probably use a lot less.
Oh yeah. And
And also if you buy a glandular, if the glandular doesn't say 100% grass-fed organic, assume it came from a commercial feedlot. You want to take a commercial feedlot liver. A lot of doctors sell this stuff because they don't know. They get their information from the sales rep who gets their information from people who run the company. So you're not getting objective information anywhere, unfortunately.
that's a big problem, Doc. I could see, like, when you say, like, you don't know, like, the quality of products, because that's one thing that I appreciate, because when you said that if you have a good quality product and you can, eliminate, if you use good quality products that really do, clean out the system, you may not have to take that many. Because I think that what I have found with your products, and people, yes, I am praising your products. I'm serious, because like first time I encountered them, I could feel. I know it sounds unusual, people out there, but you can kind of feel, in my opinion, like if something is going to work well. I just feel that way sometimes. Like I'm like, oh, this is going to work well. And what I have seen is that, Doc, we all talk about, different forms of cleansing and detox, and they call it liver methylation and such. But one thing I've really appreciated about for people out there listening is that if you find the good, clean products like Doc's Supreme Nutrition line, and you clean out a lot of these bacterias and viruses and mold, you don't need as many minerals and vitamins like to help accomplish, like, everybody says you need to take so much of vitamin D and vitamin B and vitamin C. And I agree. Many people do need them. I take some of those things, but I've realized with my patients, if I really get them on like the Supreme, I start them off with that. I clean out as much as I can. And if they need something, they may need it, but it keeps their dosages low, like, the amount they take.
Think about, like, let's say you're eating a food you're sensitive to and you don't know it. So your body's making histamines and kinins as a result. So every time you eat that food, your body's using up B6 and folic acid and zinc to break down the histamines and kinins. So, you wonder why do I need to take B6 my whole life? It's because you never took care of the food that's depleting your B6. Or why do I need zinc? I'm eating too much phytic acid in my foods, and that, binds zinc and takes it out of the body. Or I work in the perfume aisle of Nordstrom's, and I don't know why I need to take molybdenum every day. I mean, you need it to break down the aldehydes. There are all kinds of things that when you get your life more under control, you don't need to take these substances nearly as much.
This is amazing, Doc. This is like the stuff I love talking to you about. This is what people want to hear. I mean, and Doc, like, I want us to do when your schedule permits, we'll start doing like the part 2 and some of the future stuff, or talk about anything you want to talk about, really, honestly. And I think that's a wealth of knowledge. So today, everybody out there, we covered some good ground. We covered like the chronic infections. We covered some chronic food sensitivities, and we talked about like the supplement lines in industry. And Doc, we're going to put this out there, but I want it to be more of like a small series if we can do it. And I'm glad because I've gotten more of a setup here. Like now I can just start jumping on, but we've had some studio stuff going on. But for everybody out there, because I can release this on not only like Instagram, but also on YouTube. So we'll have it like anybody that wants to hear about certain maybe topics with you, Doc, maybe they can drop something in the comment section and then maybe I can ask you about it. But I'm just going to say, like, I hold you in the highest regards, Doc. And I really appreciate this time that you allow me to speak with you because, I really love Doc and I think it would him and his son Noah they did two amazing jobs. So thanks, Doc, for joining us today for doing this.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm happy to talk whenever.